Hello, everyone. Welcome to Real Talk, the talk show where I give my opinion on relevant issues of today, and I'm only censored because Miss Pearson is watching this right now. Just kidding, just kidding. I love you, Miss Pearson. Please don't dock my marks. I also know that talk shows don't really use cue cards, but I have a really bad memory, so we're just going to roll with it today. I'm your host, Kelly Lamb. Today, we're going to discuss the lack of student voice and representation in school divisions. More specifically, addressing the question, why aren't students given more of a voice at the board level of school divisions when we are the ones directly impacted by their decisions? I bet most of the adults outside of education are probably wondering, why should students care about the board? Why should they care about policy? It's not their wheelhouse. They're not mature enough. Why are they even worried about it? Right? I'm not passing judgment. I'm really not. Believe me, I used to think the exact same thing. My whole life, I believed that the adults always knew what was best for me and that they could handle it. Just like my father thought naming me, hold on, this is good, Candy, like candy cane, Candy Lamb, was the height of ingenious for his 4'11" stature. Like the board with only adults. Great intentions. There was always great intentions there. But the results were a little bit skewed. You can thank my mom and siblings for saving me from that terrible name. Anyways, we're going to continue on. When you think of school boards, you probably imagine a large table. Unlike mine, I just got a little end table. And they get chairs too. I'm sitting on pillows. Surrounded by adults in their 40s to 70s. For most of Saskatchewan, that would be exactly right. It's like an educational Arthur's Round Table of knowledge, and they know everything. Out of 27 school divisions, 2 have student representation at the board level. SRPSD, which is our school division, and Prairie Spirit, which just started this year. I'm a trustee for SRPSD, and I was really shocked at the privilege I had. I interviewed Kirsten Kelly, the Public Affairs Coordinator for the OSTA-ACO, Ontario's Student Trustee Association, where every school division has required student trustees. Here is their explanation on how the Ontario system works. I know this is probably a lot to break down, so I'll just ask you for a glimpse of it, but how does the system generally in Ontario work? And what is set in place in order to ensure that students have a voice?
Of course. So the system is a bit complicated, but it mainly is run by our Ministry of Education. So so the Ministry of Education, I'm not sure if it requires, I don't think you should quote me on that, but majority of boards in Ontario, mostly public boards and Catholic boards, private boards, because they are private, they are not they don't have that much responsibility because they aren't paid by taxpayers and all that. So public boards and Catholic boards each have student trustees. So for example, I'm a Burlington student trustee in the Catholic Board of Halton, but there is going to be another Burlington student trustee. They're just going to be a part of the public board instead.
Oh.
So usually it's going to be 2 student trustees. I know some boards also, it varies based on location. So for example, in Toronto, they have 2 student trustees, even though it's one city. Usually it's for every city or every region, it's going to be 1 student trustee per region. And basically, the student trustees, for the most part, at least in my board and multiple other boards, are voted on by student senators, which are student senate groups, youth groups, that are run by the school boards as well. So student senators are usually chosen by previous student trustees. It necessarily doesn't have to be a student senate group. They may have different names, but generally they're secondary school activists or I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the word.
No problem.
But youth action groups.
There we go.
Yeah. So that's pretty much how they're decided on. So then there's a general vote that happens, and then the popular vote usually, or not the popular vote, the vote with the person with the most amount of votes usually wins. And then in that case, um, these student trustees that are voted on, they're either transitional, so they can be previous student trustees that got reelected, or entirely new trustees. And student trustees not are usually in grade 9 or 10. Usually they're going into grade 11 or going into grade 12. There are a few student trustees who are in grade 13 or older years, but they do have to be in high school just
Gotcha.
because they speak on the behalf of high school or elementary students because they are involved in tax or publicly funded school areas education.
Wasn't that a lovely explanation by Kirsten? They sound much more mature than a lot of adults I know. I've met adults that call teachers overpriced babysitters.
What?
Okay, Karen, I want you to try and make a beep test somewhat enjoyable. For anyone, not even just the runners, but for the people that have to watch their friends suffer. Teachers somewhat make that better than hell. Once you can do that, then we can talk. I'm sorry teachers are the only adults that your child wants to be around with that kind of attitude. What immaturity! Which brings me to my next point. Maturity is a heavily weighted concern of the student trustee. Teens aren't considered mature enough because they are so young, they're still in school, they haven't had enough life experiences yet to be deemed mature. That couldn't be farther from the truth. Just because you're 80 doesn't mean you're mature. You are mature when you are open minded and you consider all points of view in any problem or situation and you are open to new ideas. When board members went to high school, they worried about what job you wanted, how you want to spend the rest of your life, how you want to grow old, right? This generation has that, topped with the cherry of worrying if we will have a future at all, with the worries of political divide and the environmental issues plaguing our world. Every single person in this newer generation, Generation Z, if you will, have already been matured beyond their years because of all the political issues surrounding us. I'll give you an example of youth maturity. In 2019, Greta Thunberg single handedly rallied millions of students to fight to save this earth. She gave one of the most powerful speeches the UN has ever heard, condemning world leaders for their lack of environmental action. She became Time's Person of the Year in 2019. She was 16 years old at the time. There are some 60 to 70, 80-year-olds I met in life that have done not even close to that amount to benefit our world. That is true maturity. When you take the issues of multiple people, something that is plaguing multiple people, and you put forward an effort to fix it. A sore loser across the border is trying to sell off one of the last pristine Arctic wildlife refuges for oil out of spite of losing. And that man still technically runs the United States of America. There are many other students like Greta, but they don't have a platform to do so. I'll let Kirsten talk about the frustration of a student-led motion getting removed. It's a little bit almost upsetting to hear that with a province so ahead of the game, you will, if you will, in student voice, that you still feel unheard, ironically, if that makes sense.
Yeah, not only on my behalf, but I want to speak on the behalf of the Toronto Catholic Board as well, just because they have been published and they spoke out about this publicly as well.
Mhm.
So when COVID first started, or not when it first started, sorry, but when we were returning back to school in September, they made an initiative because Catholic school boards are known to use uniforms, right?
Yes.
So within their board, they wanted to have like a bit of a bending of rules on in terms of uniforms, just because uniforms A are expensive,
I've
and
heard. I've heard.
B because they're so expensive, you're gonna have to wash them every day because of COVID. Whereas before, like some students would wear it for a week and like they'd be fine. But now they have to worry about bacteria and germs like more so than before because it's a death, like a risk of that
Yeah,
catching coronavirus, right?
that's right.
So they tried to pass that motion and it originally did get passed, but then adult parents came forward in saying that like it wasn't in line with the Catholic beliefs, and then they revoked the whole they revoked the motion. So unfortunately their motion was revoked, obviously, and um, once again, student voice was shown not to be listened to because students, not only the student trustees, but students were in grand support of them because they entirely agreed, because there are students in poverty, there's students who are lower class who can't afford it, and like they can't afford to buy more uniforms that they already have. They can't afford to wash it every single day.
Yeah.
And student voice wasn't listened to because it was the voice of the parents who had the free time to say, no, don't do this. And then it was revoked. So this isn't only on the behalf of mine, but I know other student trustees feel this way too because they feel like a figurehead, especially when they bring forward these items that aren't taken seriously or revoked or unheard.
If you take what happened in Ontario at face value, it was truly a ridiculous situation. Student trustees did their due diligence by listening to the students and brought forward this real issue to the board. The board passed the motion as they found a solution. Students were happy and they were safer. After the successful implementation of the motion, parents were the ones who complained and got the motion revoked. They couldn't stand breaking the rules. They were more willing to risk children's lives and livelihood rather than alter a minor rule that had no effect on their education. This goes to show how little the student voice is respected, even if student voice is in place. Student trustees simply want what is best for their students. In our youthful slang, it's the lack of trust for me. These board members have gone through education in a completely different time period. They went to school roughly in the late 40s to early 90s. Students during that time may not have been mature enough, and it would have been because of the lack of education and a lack of accessible information. In the digital age, we can get any info we want in a matter of minutes, seconds even. We educate ourselves on our peers' issues so that we can uplift them in their battle against it, but not taking away from their voice. In decades past, you had to use a phone so large it was called a bread box. You better appreciate that pun. I worked really hard on it. These bread boxes, they only had one main purpose, was communication from one person to another. These days, on our modern bread boxes, you can talk to people, you can do your banking, do your school assignments, and film a feature-length film on this small little hunk of metal. The education system itself has changed massively. Students were separated by skin color, and African American students got less quality education because they were believed to be less than human. We took First Nations children, stole them from their homes, assaulted, raped, and murdered them, stole their culture from them because the education system believed that these kids were savages. For years, women were forced to take certain classes like home economics because the education system believed that the woman should stay home and let the man be the breadwinner. All of these things I've said were once disgustingly normal parts of the education system. It proves that with fighting and with fighting for your rights, you can get things changed because that is not normal. Combining both of these worlds, I'll give one clear example: cyberbullying of students in the digital age. Before, bullying was in person, verbal or physical. You could still somehow get justice and get some sort of a relief from that pain. Now, you can hide behind an electronic screen and instantly attacking someone at any given time. A study from Leaguer showed that the number one worry of Canadian parents is cyberbullying. It's not like the past where the worries were, oh, my teen's going to get pregnant, or oh, they're going to use drugs, which are still important issues. But the fact that cyberbullying is number one is a change from previous times. Because think about it this way: how do you protect your child from a threat you can't see? I'm going to bring back Kirsten to share their opinion on technological advancement in the education system. I think you've already answered this question, but I think I do want to dive a little bit more into it. Um, Adult members of school boards, like we were speaking of before, have gone through the education system just as we students are going through it right now. However, the education system 40, 30, 20, or even just 10 years ago is vastly different than it is today. Not only because of the advancement of the system, but of the advancements of technology and the world around us. So, with these different experiences, how do you think the mindset of an adult could differ from the mindset of a student when it comes to issues in education? And why do you feel that it's essential to hear both points of view?
Yes, for sure. So, as I stated previously, in one of your questions, Ontario, Canada in general, and the world is getting more diverse. And there's many different people, different types of people, race, religion, sexual orientation, gender, like so many different topics I can touch upon that I can't even name right now, that are affected by education and the changes that it makes. So, having youth voice is really important, and it's just as important, if not more important, in the case of education, because like I said previously, we're the ones that are directly impacted by these changes. So concerning the question about adults and what they have to offer, like the similarities and what they have to offer in terms of children and why our voices are important, it's and like the difference in in opinion. I think it's important to hear this difference in opinion just because adults can theorize what they want to what they believe in, right? Because of course we're not trying to deny that. Don't say your opinion, you're wrong, you're not directly impacted. No, of course there are staff members, there are teachers that are impacted by these same laws as well. So I definitely agree in the fact that adult voice definitely needs to be heard in terms of education. I'm not saying that, but I'm directly speaking to the fact that student voice also needs to be heard because we are also the ones impacted by the changes that are being made to education as well. So there's a lot of varying voices that needs to be heard from staff members, from teachers that see what's happening with students, and from students who are directly impacted by what teachers do, by what staff do. So it's really important to hear that diversity in opinion, because especially now, as you mentioned, in the internet, like with the access to internet, students are more aware of what's happening, and they have a sense of more self-awareness and more awareness about what's going on around them, especially with the spread of information that's happening and through social media and in general.
All of my rambling has been to prove one point. The game of education has drastically changed, and boards need the fresh eyes of active students to keep improving it. We may not be mature or educated in systems of the past, but we are knowledgeable, informed, and experienced in the system right now, the one that they are making decisions for. Student voice is also lacking because we are never told about it or it's never marketed to us. I did not know about student trustees until grade 10 when I joined the Saskatchewan River Students for Change. Let's listen to Kirsten and their experience coming in to student trusteeship. I just wanted to know your thoughts on, in general, like you've said this before, what power would be brought forward if a student could at least bring forward a motion or have a vote, and the feeling of, wow, as a student trustee, I'm actually making an impact.
Yes, for sure. So I would really love to speak on this behalf. So this isn't my voice specifically, but because I was interested in becoming a student trustee in grade 10, I only became a student trustee in grade 12, so this year.
Yeah.
But fortunately, the one that surpassed me, I guess,
Or the
in
one
grade
preceded you?
that preceded me. So he was a phenomenal student trustee, and I'm glad that he was able to get in because he did make a lot of change that he wanted to on his behalf.
Mhm.
Um, but then obviously there have like they spoke to us specifically saying that no, you can make the change. You just have to put the effort in, because they said that their predecessors or their outgoings were telling them, don't bother making the change. It's pointless. This is only a figurehead job. So they
Yeah.
were heavily discouraged, and when they realized that they could make the change, it was too late.
Yeah.
So of course, you can invalidate the experiences that they felt in saying that they didn't feel like their voices were being heard, but at the same time, they shouldn't be telling their incoming student trustees, don't bother making a change, because that's also discouraging. And you have to try, even in those cases of barriers. So,
Yeah.
like, for example, what I said, like, yeah, at times I feel like a figurehead, but that doesn't stop me from kind of bringing my voice forward, because I know at some extent I still am being listened to.
Yeah. Well, according to that story, student voice is pointless. Original student trustees were told that they could not make a change, so the new student trustees would come in each year and be told that they would have no value at the board table. That is so disheartening because I have met people like that in Saskatchewan, but our system is behind and needs to be modernized. I would never think that in Ontario, where they have regular student trustees in every division for years now, that they would have that stigma. It goes to show that student voice, it may be here and it may be growing, but it is still at a bare minimum, and there is so much room to improve for the education systems. All sides benefit from student trustees. Boards get more relevant information to make the best decision possible, which is their obligation as a school board. Students get their issues heard, respected, and possibly solved when student trustees bring the issues forward. Trustees get to help enhance our education system while improving our leadership skills. Our system in Saskatchewan has to improve. We tried to get legislation to have student trustees on every board with voting power, which is crucial, and we were shot down by 72% of the available voting, which is a 19% improvement from the 91% shutdown from years previous. Students deserve to have their voices heard and respected by the people governing our daily school lives. We are elected members of the board just like our adult counterparts. We are not here to be figureheads like the Queen. We want to have actual help in the decision making process. We are here to collaborate with the adults to make the best education system possible for everyone in it. To quote Kirsten here, the youth are the future. We're going to be the ones that are going to be adult trustees, that are put in boardrooms, that do these things. But we are not only the future, we are also the present. Let us be the leaders we want to be so that we can help improve not only the future of education, but so we can guide Saskatchewan to a better tomorrow. That has been Real Talk. Thank you for listening. I'm Kelly Lamb, and I will see you next week. Goodbye.